I'm Martin. I'm CEO of Austrian Audio, so the company that was founded just 2 years ago in Vienna. And yeah, we'll bring to you our new microphones and very soon headphones, but we'll talk about that later.
Well, here we are again in the Minotaurium at Funky Junk. Today, really privileged to have Martin Seidl with us, who is the, well, he explained exactly what his official title is, but I'll just call him the head of the Austrian microphone company. Tell us how the company came about.
Well, obviously, you mentioned the company where most of the people have worked for decades and years, and some of them their lifetime. So it was AKG. I was working there as VP of Global Sales, Market Development. And I left Harman and the company 2014 and was living in Manchester, by the way, then after that for 2 years.
So you really fell on poor times.
And when I was here, you may or may not know that, of course, AKG was part of the Harman Group, and the Harman Group as such, though being the largest supplier of pro audio gear, the whole Harman Group was sold in 2017 to the Samsung Group in Korea. And so that changed a lot.
And didn't they want it for home entertainment and in-car audio rather than...
Automotive was the major reason for them. And this is also from a revenue point of view, it's the largest part of the Harman Group, is the automotive part. So that's definitely the major focus where this group develops and also in its new ownership. There were some substantial changes made in the whole setup of the Pro Audio Group. So a lot of headquarters of major brands around the globe were closed. So headquarters of AKG in Vienna was closed. All the product management, all the R&D team, everyone was let go. Same happened, by the way, to the Crown Factory. Same happened to the DBX, BSS Lexicon company, to the Studer company, to Soundcraft. Right? So basically all these facilities were closed. When I heard about that they're closing down really, a 70-year-old company with all the heritage, with all the knowledge, this alerted me because I was always in love with the tradition of making microphones in the way they were made, and headphones, by the way, because that's also a very, very well-known product of this company.
And
so
at one stage cartridges as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was cartridges for a while, but that's wasn't a long tradition really. And then, of course, when vinyl went down, they stopped that pretty fast. So when I heard that this headquarters was going to be closed, this was in autumn 2016 already. So it was pretty long time before the actual closure. It was already announced. There is only a very small period of time before that team, disappears in all different directions. And no doubt that many of these engineers who are now working for Austrian Audio, which is the company we founded, could have find places to work because they're great engineers and stuff like that. But to have this interaction between the disciplines, it is not only the acoustician who knows what it needs to make a great microphone, but then there is a mechanical issue that influences the acoustics so much that the electronic engineer has dealt with several times over the last 20 years, and bringing that together, that teamwork makes the great product in the end, right?
So this must have involved a huge amount of work, because to take an existing team, how many people did you take from AKG?
Well, initially we started off with 20, right?
That's a large payroll to actually go into development from scratch.
True.
because the development process is very long.
True.
So, firstly, had the idea been gestating in your mind for a time? Because
It had. I mean,
yeah.
Frankly, ideas like that even, popped up many years before that, even under times when, it was Harman and not AKG anymore. And ideas were there. And then when the closure was announced, we really thought, okay, was basically a friend of mine and I who discussed we should do something about that. And I started to run around and see if there is a valid idea, because, of course, there's passion and all in this company, and you would be amazed about the passion that's in there, and everyone living this life, designing musical tool, right? A creative tool. But of course, you have to have a valid financing business plan.
I was about to say, I mean, it must have required a huge investment.
Well, we had, I think, a valid strategy for that. What we did, as we had engineers both from the very well-known professional audio side, but you also know that under that brand, there were also made hi-fi consumer headphones, right? So this knowledge was there. And it was clear in the beginning that we would only want to focus with Austrian audio to the professional side of the business, because that is our passion. That's where we want to be. That's where we want to, develop new and exciting stuff. But we could use our, let's say, hi-fi or lifestyle knowledge to do a B2B division and R&D services to third parties. So that was part of the business strategy. So for the first 2 years, and it took us more than 2 years to design our first finished good.
I can believe it. Yeah, absolutely.
So for 2 years, you had to pay a lot of people. We are now 37 people, because even other people joined us later from the former AKG team.
It's a substantial organization.
So this is now a nice little organization with manufacturing in-house and with designing in-house, with all the development in-house, with all disciplines in-house. So there was a second division, or there is still a second division, where we offer as a B2B service to third parties, developing for very well-known hi-fi brands, headphone projects, for example, right?
Which is a boom market.
Which is a boom market.
Southeast Asia.
So there are some, speaker manufacturers who want to get into the headphone business for obvious reasons, business reasons, and we help them with designing the product, because they have no idea how to do that, really. I love to refer to Austrian Audio as a startup company with more than 350 years in experience. And that's rather rare. So that's our really benefit, the team. I mean, there was no other reason to found this company if there weren't that team.
Sure.
I mean, it's just the asset is really the people. It's now 28 engineers, of which 26 are former AKG engineers. And
which means they've got a passion and a pride in their work. It's not just a job.
Oh, absolutely. And you can absolutely believe that I'm not in a position probably to even pay Harman wages. So a lot of these people wanted to do and wanted to create microphones and headphones, and even took hits in their, probably income to do what they're doing, because they love what they're doing. We have started with developing not a product. We have started with developing a new acoustic, because that's the heart of the microphone. We've started with developing. I mean, you see it lying here, and I want to show it to you. Because that's really the heart. That's the capsule, and if you look at it, it's a beauty. And
are these assembled by hand?
These are assembled by hand.
So it's back to the original AKG tradition.
It's back to this tradition, and it's even the membranes are built in-house, and then of course assembled into this capsule. But the big difference on this one is it combines the best of two worlds. You mentioned brass capsules, which are the traditional, 50s, 60s, partly 70s made. Then the industry, a lot of them changed over to plastic capsules for easier build, for higher yield in the
And
production.
consistency as well.
For consistency, but there are also downsides to the plastic capsule. A central issue is the weight of the capsule, the mass of the capsule. If you want to reproduce the especially low end very exactly, you need the weight, the mass of the housing, which you don't have with a plastic capsule. The thing is, this is made out of ceramic, and the ceramic is first it offers you the same weight as the metal capsule, but it takes away a lot of disadvantages, like it's a complete isolator. So all electric issues with short-cutting when moisture comes, or all the isolating thing you had to do between the brass capsules if you do dual, basically are not an issue with the ceramic one. Ceramic doesn't change over time, so the consistency is as good as a plastic, but it's much more solid. And again, we could gain the weight we need to really picture that kind of frequency response people were looking for since the brass capsules has disappeared. And I'm not talking about sound because we just can test it and listen to it, right? As you did. But the frequency response here, especially in the smooth high, you can even stress it by adding a lot of high-end DSP, and you still wouldn't make this capsule sound harsh. And I think that's the most important part of this smooth high-end frequency or capsule to create products that sound as we are all looking for. Right?
It's something that Marco commented on, that there's a smoothness, even though there's a clarity at the top end.
Yeah.
It wasn't harsh.
It's never harsh. And so, we spent a year on doing that before you even thought about a product. Right? So you can look at this open mic. So you can see this is completely isolated. So, yes. And that also gives the name to the microphone OC, because we're talking about open condenser, because we try to give as much free field to the capsule as possible, right? That's why the cage is pretty large. And there's, for example, another little acoustic detail, maybe something you wouldn't come up with if you haven't thought about centuries or decades about ideas. It's the first large condenser mic that doesn't have the issue of reflections from the body of the electronics. Every large condenser microphone has this housing where the electronics in there, right? And if you measure this distance in most of the large condenser mics, it's the reflections between the body and the capsule is around 6 to 7 kilohertz, right? And yes, you can deal with that if you know that. Resonance, yeah. So what we did here, we implemented diffuser, so there is no reflection from the body, right? Again, make it as free field as possible. So that gives the product a little bit the name of OC open condenser for, and boys and girls, don't do this at home, we just do this here, right? Disassemble your microphone. Let me state one thing. We are talking about an analog microphone. Very important. Yeah? There is no DSP in it. There is no digital in the audio path, because for us that was extremely important.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a traditional. So that's why we started with the capsule, because we, different than probably other microphones that come to market these days. You can mention emulation microphone systems, stuff like that. They don't care too much about where the sound starts at the capsule, because they put a lot of DSP at the end and form something different out of the capsule. This was not our approach. We said the capsule needs to be brilliant. And when you plug an XLR cable into that, it just needs to be the perfect sound. the idea always was, yes, traditional microphone, yes, classic, analog microphone, great capsule, and if you plug in an XLR cable and you want to select your patterns, you're done and you have a great microphone. But we thought there must be more to that, because why do we have to select between an Omni or a Cardioid or a figure of 8 if we have all the world in between?
Yeah.
Right? So why can't I create my own pattern I like for this instrument most? And that's, again, that's user-based. People have so many ideas how to place microphones, how to work with microphones, and then missing out on fine-tuning a pattern, for example. Now, if you understand that a pattern control is only possible if you have two perfect cardioids, because if they are not perfect, matching each other, then the result of adding them is anything, right? So that's the first part, that the two capsules need to be most identically, right? But then, how do you change a pattern? Well, basically, you're changing the voltage that goes to the capsules, right? So you're making one louder, you're making the other one lower. Now, I can't do this seamlessly on a switch that has 4 positions. So that's why we came up with how could we get into this microphone and giving, the creative person out there the opportunity to do more than switching these 4 positions. And the idea there was, we gave it a second in and output at the back. It's just a 5-pin XLR. And we created this little, and now comes the Bluetooth to a recording studio microphone. Well, don't worry, it's not affecting any of the audio path. We give you the control opportunity. Let me refer to our heritage a little bit here. What was on the C12 the outstanding thing for the studio owner? Well, he had this big metal breakout box with the selection between the patterns remotely. Yeah. Well, what we are doing here is, if you connect this little Bluetooth dongle, which is powered by 48 volt, so you don't need extra battery for that. So even if it's mounted somewhere up there, fixed installed, you always are fine. And then we give you a free of charge little app that looks like this, right? You can now remote control the microphone completely. So you can not only change the patterns, you can also add the high pass filter, you can add the attenuation pads, even without touching the microphone.
So in other words, you can sling it above an orchestra or above a drum kit or above a band, and then
there
remotely tune the microphone
to
the room, the acoustics, the band.
Or you have it as a main microphones in front of an orchestra in the room, and you are not familiar with the room yet, and you don't know how much of the room you want to have in the microphone. Are you going hypercardioid or giving an omni because the room sounds nice? Do you want a step ladder all the time, up, down, testing it? Or with that remote, you just do it from your phone. I think what the creative part in the studio on that opportunity now is now you can not only select a cardioid, but you can seamlessly make it from any pattern in real time to any pattern.
And hear what's happening as you do.
And as you go, you hear what's happening. You can listen to your room, as, for example, if you're using it on a saxophone and you want to listen the room modes and sometimes on a figure of 8, and I'm sure you have tried that, right? Yeah. That gives you an ambience on the instrument that is amazing. Or sometimes the room doesn't sound perfect for that kind of instrument, and you rather go direct into a cardioid or hypercardioid mode. But in that way, you can, in 250 steps, choose between any. And that's why this is the first real multi-pattern microphone. It's not a selection between either 8 or, So, this is a real new creative opportunity. And if you play a little bit with it, and by the way, it's educative as well, because if you learn your spores as a sound engineer, how much do you really know that a pattern affects the sound of the recording? Yeah. With that, you can really try. How much of the room do I want to hear? How much of direct input do I want to hear from the instrument?
How much proximity effect can you tune out?
true, right? And so this is a complete remote control of everything the microphone can do without affecting any or applying any DSP to the sound. We are just analogically changing the voltage that goes to the capsules. I told you it's not only an input for the Bluetooth dongle, but it's also an output. So if you apply this little cable that's in the box, you now can record both capsules separately.
Oh, right.
I mean, it's not the first microphone that does this, right? We know that. But what can you do if you, for example, record both capsules to your tape recorder or DAW, right?
It's like a sound field. You can basically tune it in the mix.
Yes. Yes, you can. And basically, you could, and it's a very creative process, you can, in the mix down, again, change as if you would have recorded in a cardioid mode or in a hypercardioid mode or in an omni mode. So again, you don't have to take this decision before you tape it. You can take this decision after you tape it. Now, an experienced sound engineer does know exactly what he's doing, and he's choosing the right pattern for his recording, position the microphone correctly. But that's being said, sometimes a very experienced sound engineer comes into a place he doesn't know. Sure, yeah. Probably doesn't have the time to really listen to the room, and you know, then you have still the decision to decide afterwards. Doing a live recording, for example. I mean, remember, this microphone can cope with up to 158 dB sound pressure level.
That's DPA territory.
Yeah. So that's really mostly anything, right? You can record. You could even put it into a bass drum, right? During a live session, for example, on the live mix, you would need the punchy bass to cut through the mix and the noise and the ambience, right? But then probably you're doing a live album or a mix down of that for a recording. And then you don't want this hard and punchy bass drum anymore. You want to hear more of the instrument. So if you have recorded both capsules, you have, for the live event, you just take the front capsule for the punch, but in the mix down, you can make the instrument sound natural again, right? Because you don't need to have this punch in the recording, right? So there are options given with recording both capsules. And if you want to play a little bit more creative, there is a also very, very unique plugin for your DAW. When you, I can't show it to you right here, but please download it and play with it, because you would be amazed if you take the time how creative that tool is. Because then the plugin creates out of your 2 capsule recordings a mono track again. And then you can, for example, open up the plugin and divide the signal into 5 frequency bands. And now this is a little bit of a brain drain here, right? We are not talking about DSPing. We're just talking about selecting 5 frequency bands. And with the plugin, I can then make the signal in the low end, for example, as a performing in an omni mode, but in a mid-high frequency, performing as a hypercardioid.
This is getting scary.
It is scary, but you know, try to think a little bit as frequency-dependent beamforming.
Yeah, yeah.
So make it a little bit simple as an example. Record a snare, you know, on axis, optimized with an OC818. What's the most problem signal most of the time you get into the snare mic? The hi-hat, right? In early days, or usually you would try to DSP the frequency of the hi-hat out, but of course this affects your snare drum sound.
Yeah, it's almost like having a de-esser built in.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of selective frequency filtering.
Well, in this case you don't. In this case you really leave most of the microphone to the snare as it is, and only at the frequency band where the hi-hat kicks in, you make the beam narrow, right? So you take the signal more direct. If you say, no, I just want to card it, you know, I just don't need the steering options, I just know that I'm using it in my environment or in my studio where I use basically 90% the carded setup, right? And I want to have the same quality of sound. Who would have expected it? We have a solution for that, the little brother. So what you have there is basically exactly the same microphone sound-wise, sensitivity-wise, frequency response-wise, same ceramic capsule in there, but just one. So it's not a dual capsule, right?
And this is £500, which is, you know, very modest price for a high-spec mic.
High spec, made in Vienna, and an interesting one probably. In your experience, I'm sure you have dealt with the request of having a stereo matched pair.
All the time.
Yeah, so people are asking, probably you guys, please can you organize from a manufacturer the perfect matched pair? Well, if you go through the list of, let's say, the key microphone manufacturer, most of them will offer that service. And what would you say? What's the plus minus deviation between the microphones you get when you order a match?
They claim around about 1 to 2 dB.
Plus minus?
Yeah. That's the general claim they make.
On a matched pair?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what would you say if we claim that any of our microphones, without ordering a matched pair, comes within half a dB plus minus?
I would say you've just lost the matched pair market.
Yes, you're right. But interestingly enough, we just recently had an experience, and that's, again, you know, new upcoming technology. We're talking about immersive recordings.
Oh, yeah.
3D recordings.
Yeah, no, we've got clients who are really going crazy with that stuff now.
And we just had a pretty famous Japanese engineer doing immersive recordings. And he says, well, that's a statement, plus minus half a dB. I can do 5, 8 of these microphones, and I know I have all matched. And you can't order 8 matched microphones from a manufacturer, right? No. So, and I mentioned before that these two mics are pretty much the same, just the one is a single capsule and the other is a dual, but you could even match those two plus minus half a dB. So if you put this one on a cardioid, right? So even that 2 microphones would be plus minus half a dB.
In other words, you could have one of each in the cupboard, and you've then got a third option as well.
Exactly. You can use this as a stereo pair, but you can use it also in a sophisticated remote control way, a single microphone, and probably save those £200. Yeah, you can.
Martin, it's been not merely a pleasure, it's been a privilege, but it's been an eye-opener. I'm sure AKG lasted 75 years before moving on. I think Austrian Audio have got 75 bright years ahead of them, and I shall certainly enjoy using them.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike, thank you.